point of the population chart?
Well, I mean, I was just interested, you know, we've been talking about the idea of righteousness and consciousness starting to reach human consciousness, let's say, at the time of Moses, all right, that was, the time of, well, actually at the time of Job, which was actually before Moses, okay. Keep in mind that Job lived 16 or 1700 years before Christ, and the book of Job, was only written 1,000 years later. So whatever happened to Job, nobody knows, but some writer started to write about it in whatever it was, between 3 and 600 BC. We don't even know that. But it was 1,000 years after he supposedly lived. Job, according to the story of Job, which was embellished, of course, in the great telephone game through the Jewish community for 1,000 years, but Job was the first one to figure out that God has a dark side and a good side. And so when God decides to make this bet with Satan, or agrees to the bet with Satan, Job pleads to his good side, right? Like pleading a case in court, except we know that this judge is both good and bad, so I'm going to plead to the good side, right? Because the bad side is whipping up on me pretty bad, right? and so then 300 or 400 years or 500 years maybe passed before Moses, and so Moses comes out with the 10 Commandments, because he was actually leading a rabble out of Egypt. Okay, they wanted to pray to graven images, and they wanted to have adultery and all the usual things that humans want to do, right?
I've already started my graven images.
Graven or graven? Or both.
Okay. So at that time, so this was the introduction of the law, all right, which was Moses went up on the mountain, and we'll never really know what happened up on the mountain, but when he came down, he had tablets that had written in stone the 10 Commandments, right? And so then humans started to live by the law. Thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that. Okay, that works for a period of time.
Gnostics took that to
Pardon?
The Gnostics took that to task. They were very critical of that sort of.
Right, and so that's why Dr. Jung gets accused of Gnosticism. and who am I to disagree? I'm not going to disagree. I know the guy used to wear a Gnostic ring all the time, which had a serpent or a snake on it, and it had other.
You know what I just read? That Simon Magus,
Mm-hmm.
he was he was a contemporary of JC and another guy. They were all followers of John the Baptist, or they were initiated by John the Baptist, right?
And Simon Magus was
one of them.
Was baptized, okay.
And he had a big following. I mean, it was huge. But he was the one that entered. Huh?
He could fly. That's why they liked him.
There was a movie about him years ago where he created a tower, and
he was a wizard. His reputation was as a wizard. The tower is Merlin.
Right? Well, no, I saw a Simon Magus tower in a movie. Okay, where I don't know, for some reason he was creating this tower. I don't remember the movie. It's like 60 years ago. But in the movie, he builds this tower, and he's going to show he flies, and he has wings built and so on, and then he jumps off the tower, and of course he dies. But
That's not the real story.
yeah, well, in the movie it was a really bad dude. But anyway, go ahead.
But he introduced the idea of Sophia.
Ah,
He's the one that brought Sophia into the mix, and the whole thing of wisdom. And Sophia is the first thought. You know, this is the way they're talking about it. And so there's God, and then the first thought of God is wisdom, and that's where all of creation came from, was via Sophia.
right, which is the Gnostic pleroma.
His version of it, yeah.
Yeah, which had
But he had
Was he a Gnostic?
yeah. I mean, he
Oh, he was?
he wandered around like Jesus, and people just flocked there.
I thought he was in Rome or something.
I guess he could have been.
he might have been.
Yeah, I mean, they wandered around. They went everywhere in those days. On foot, I guess. Jesus. Must have been in great shape. Or else their donkeys or horses or something.
I think they had sandals though.
Yeah, good sandals.
Good sandals. I'm sure they were good sandals.
Not those-
Paul was a leather worker, so he probably made his own shoes.
I suppose. Yeah, he was a leather worker.
Yeah, he had a shop. He'd set up a tent, in every town that he went into, and he would make leather things.
And
repair
that's
things.
how he paid for his
Made
life.
living.
Wow.
That's how he spread his gospel and his word. Was through his shop. He basically had a kiosk.
Yeah. Well, tell me about Paul for a minute, because I'm not very familiar with the Pauline Gospels, but I know we attribute to him the spreading of Christianity in the first generation.
Well, psychologically, I think he's very interesting because, and I used to have contempt for it, but now I understand it better. But he created the idea of the vicarious atonement, so you could give up your life. Well, you could gain your life because Christ was giving his up. So it was a payment, a kind of a
Quid pro
payment.
quo.
As you worshipped him, then you were brought in to his fold because he had given up his life for you, and therefore, if you had a destroyed life or a life that you weren't satisfied with, or you were in some kind of psychic crisis, then you could trade that in, change your attitude and everything, and become saved. So he came up with
And
the
go
whole
to
idea.
heaven.
Yeah, and he came up with that whole idea of vicarious atonement, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And for people who are really messed up, that's really a solution.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
before I kind of looked down my nose at it because it's so irrational.
Yeah.
But now I understand it psychologically.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's very interesting
It's a
because
substitutionary. It's a substitute for an unwanted self. So, and all mass movements start with the leader who helps the mass get rid of their unwanted selves. That's in Eric Hoffer's book, The True Believer. If you ever get
interesting.
a chance to read that book.
That would be interesting.
So
Yeah.
that's the mass psychology side of a charismatic leader.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, Paul was a persecutor of the Christians.
Yep, right.
He had his experience on the road to Damascus, and he had a conversion.
So when he was a young man, he had his warrior archetype come through, and he then persecuted Christians.
Yes.
And
He
then,
was from Tarsus originally, in Turkey. And there was a lot of pagan rites that he went through and everything, and so he gave those up when he went to Israel, became
Right.
more refined, priestly class, but he was still this kind of pagan wild man, underneath it all. He had his Jungian side.
Yeah.
He had his shadow there. And so he must have, I'm thinking, he must have had a tremendous amount of guilt or something about what he'd been doing, or he wasn't
Maybe.
achieving his catharsis, so he
Right.
had this.
That reminds me of, the three. There's Jesus and Simon Magus, and the other one I can't think of the name. It's like a Iranian, I don't know. Anyway, I think it's Asa. Anyway, one reason it took hold, because what you were talking about was Jewish Torah. They were the new Torah. So there was the old Torah, which was like just clamp down on everyone. You've got
Right.
to do this, that. You've got to follow all these rules and regulations. All of a sudden, it was like someone came along and said, "You don't have to do that." And that's how there was the big disruptors. They became the disruptors of that.
Right,
And-
because then Jesus says, I'm going to
So that
go
was,
to heaven for your sins.
yeah. So you have this break with the old Jewish orthodoxy, and that was what.
But Jesus didn't say it. Paul said it.
Paul said,
There's no mention, as far as I know, of vicarious atonement before Paul, and Paul was after Jesus.
how did Paul talk about vicarious atonement?
Well, it's a principle, basically.
The principle
It's
is,
the foundation of Christianity.
okay, so Christ died for your sins.
Yeah. Before that, there was really I don't think there was any mention of it by Christ.
Okay, so therefore,
He was Jewish.
right, so
But he
therefore,
was right. He released people from this crazy.
They were called the new
Slice
new
and
Torah.
dice.
Yeah.
well, it was a rigidity, right?
Rigidity, right.
Right, okay,
By the
because
Jewish.
societies tend to become rigid, and then somebody comes along and breaks down the rigidity,
Like Martin Luther. Yeah.
or like Donald Trump.
Yeah. That's
Right.
That's a good point, actually.
I mean, that's
why he's in there. But
why he's in there.
Paul's writings after he did this and came up with this system I think, are quite lovely as far as how to get along with the opposite sex, how to you emphasize love and beautiful stuff. But it's all contingent on that one concept.
Right. So
The
that's
love of
it.
Christ is combined with the idea that he's given up. He has sacrificed himself. And I think that's probably an old mythology anyway.
Right.
well, the
I
Gnostics
can't.
don't buy into that. at all.
I can't resist, John. You're talking about dealing with the opposite sex. It causes me to want to burst into song.
Uh-oh. Shh, John. Shh.
You ready for this? How to handle a woman. There's a way, says the wise old man. Let's see, how did it go? The way to handle a woman is to love her, love her, love her. That's it.
Where did that come from?
Camelot.
Oh, it's from Camelot?
Yeah.
But it's true.
Sung by Robert Goulet.
Oh, wow. Now suddenly it takes on a whole new.
Right. Well, it was much better. Obviously, Robert Goulet's
That sounds
rendition was considerably
Paul
better.
say?
So,
What does
so
Paul
50
say?
cents.
What does he say?
It says, husbands, love your wives. Wives, obey your husbands. And that is absolutely true. That is the way it actually will actually work.
And it is the way it actually works. But
No
we've
way.
Well, the thing is though, the onus is on us as males to provide the love, and then you get the obedience. It's not the other way around. Because if they don't feel your love, they will not obey.
yes,
They will go to hell with you, for you, if they feel love.
they will go to hell for love. They will go to hell for you for love, but they will go to hell with you.
With you if they don't have it.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have any women here tonight, so hopefully we'll have next week.